Welcome back to Block TV here at the Ethereal Summit in Tel Aviv, where the brain, the man behind Ethereum, the main guest, one could argue, Vitalik Buterin, is about to give an AMA. Asher Westrop Evans is in that room right behind us. Asher, take it away.
Hi Elle, thanks so much. Here we are at the Web3 stage of the Ethereal Summit in Tel Aviv, where we have Vitalik Buterin here coming to speak. He's going to take a Q&A here at the conference. It's all happening. An exciting time ahead of the Ethereal 2.0 Summit that's coming up, and we turn to him now. Here's Vitalik.
Here in Tel Aviv. I'm going to kick things off straight away. Vitalik, what have you been up to over the last couple of months? What's been keeping you busy?
A lot of things. Over the last couple of months, the Ethereum 1.2 Phase 0 spec has been getting finalized. So right now it's in the stage that basically says final except security audits. And there have been security audits happening. There's this wonderful Japanese formal verification team that's been looking over the Casper FFG fork choice rule, and they've been posting some suggestions for how to fix some issues on ETH research, and that's been really great. There's and the interoperability workshop that I unfortunately could not be at because I was all the way on the other side of the world from that here in Israel. And basically there were just 7 Ethereum 2.0 implementations, and everyone got together in a room and they managed to get all their clients in sync and talk to each other. And that's
so just a quick point on that. I think a common sort of observation is there's quite a few groups working on different clients and things within the Ethereum community. How is all of that kind of being coordinated in a sense? Is this all kind of like a weird mishmash of events, or are you guys a lot more organized than perceived?
There's definitely an organization happening. I mean, like Danny Ryan, our core researcher, has been doing a really good job on talking to all of these teams, answering their questions, and helping to make sure that they're all on the same page. And they end up collaborating independently quite a bit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously this whole transition is going to kick off with what we're calling Phase 0. What are the updates on that? What's the state of affairs currently?
Yeah, and it's basically the spec is finalized with, except for things that come up during these security audits. And the clients are now talking to each other. The next step is basically to make sure that they can maintain a public network at scale. And that's the thing that I think the client developers are starting to focus on now. And there's definitely enough difficult parts to it because we're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of validators that are aggregating a huge number of these BLS signatures once every few minutes. And doing this involves like aggregating some messages on subnetworks, publishing them to another subnetwork, putting them together into a block. And like this complexity is going to be necessary anyway for sharding, because like the unique thing about sharding is that there is too much data to kind of broadcast all of it in a single peer-to-peer network where everyone downloads it. But it is something that we've already started to work on for quite a while. We're continuing to work on, and it's been really interesting, though this is things that the developers have been working on more than myself. You know, from my own side, I also am focusing on Phase 1 and Phase 2 quite a bit.
That's great. So I think I've hit more of the general icebreaker questions that I wanted to do, but I wanted to make this session different and dig into a few things which I feel are still a point of contention and are being asked within the community quite a bit.
Ooh, I love contention.
All right, let's go. Let's start off softly. So, Validator Rewards. Right now, there's been a few economic models that have been pushed out by a few groups, which have sort of estimated the kind of incentive award for developers, at least, or validators that participate on ETH 2.0 to be at quite a low percentage. Can you talk us through some of the economics as it stands and the distribution over time? Yeah,
so there's been a lot of misconceptions there. So, like, for example, there's people throwing around the like 1% statistic, and in reality, right, the maximum reward is 1.7% per year, only in the case where like pretty much literally everyone is staking. And so in the case where a smaller number of validators is staking, the rewards go up quite a bit, right? So like, for example, if you go down from 100 million ETH to 10 million ETH, then we're talking about dropping from 1.7% to around something like 5.5%.
Okay.
Go down to 1 million ETH, it goes up to 17%. And then on top of that, there's like some fraction of fees that you would get. And so all to get, like, it's going to hit an equilibrium. And like, I guess it's important to kind of keep in mind that like the goal of proof of stake is ultimately to kind of minimize the costs of keeping the blockchain in consensus. And so no, we're not going to like have numbers that are just a kind of a giveaway to anyone who's willing to lock their ETH up in a box for a few weeks.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So like we think that the chain will totally have enough security if 10 million ETH is validating. And like if 90% of people think that validating is not worth it, then it's still 10 million ETH validating. So,
okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. A point on dApps. So if I'm running a dApp on ETH 1.x and I'm transitioning this onto 2.0, how exactly does that look?
Sure. So this is something that's still kind of in the process of being worked on, but the basic idea is that so ETH 2.0 phases 0, 1, and 2 will launch, and you'll be able to start doing things on your own on the ETH 2 side from scratch, except you can move your ETH over onto the ETH 2 side. But then eventually there would come a point where we would want to basically migrate the ETH 1 system over onto ETH 2. And I mean, 1 to 2 years ago, the thinking was just like, oh, we'll kind of let the ETH 1 side just kind of die off on its own and everyone will move over. But we figured out an approach that's kind of much more friendly to kind of preserving existing applications, which is basically to say at some point we'll take the state root from the ETH 1 side and we'll just do a hard fork on the ETH 2 side that takes that state root, moves it over onto the ETH 2 side, creates an account, pre-mines it with as much ETH as there is on the ETH 1 side. And from there, it's all of the applications will be able to continue running, but basically by being executed by this program on the ETH 2 side that just continues to interpret and process blocks.
Cool, that makes sense. A core feature or a core expectation from ETH 2.0 is that we're going to achieve significant scalability modifications from this. How do you think this is going to affect second layer scaling solutions? Are they going to be left out for dead or integrated somehow? How's that panning out in your head?
Second layer scaling solutions are an interesting topic. And I wrote that in a slightly controversial blog post a couple of weeks ago where I basically said that layer 2 protocols that have data off-chain are just fundamentally going to have a hard time generalizing. And like there's some economic reasoning behind that, and once you understand it, like you would realize why it's just hard to make to go from like channels and Lightning and Plasma for payments to channels and Lightning and Plasma for EVM contracts. And the kind of layer 2 that I advocated for is these layer 2s that have data off-chain but computation on-chain. And that with this kind of layer 2, it's much easier to get full generality back, but at the same time still get these very huge scaling gains. And if you do this, then you'd basically have this kind of interesting equilibrium that's halfway in between being a layer 1 application with all the benefits and costs and having a layer 2 application with the costs and benefits of that. And I think when the base chain becomes more sharded, there will be less need for fully off-chain layer 2 things. I think there will still be value for layer 2 things because they do provide genuine efficiency. And even things like repeated payments, for example.
So do you think they're going to serve specific niche, components of, say, a dApp, for example? I know, for example, you've got Axie Infinity that has, I think it's the participant layer of their game, which only runs on Loom right now.
I could definitely see them being more niche. And I could give some examples of niches. One niche that I think people really underrate is light client server markets. And basically, people talk about like we need full nodes to be incentivized so more people run full nodes.
Yeah.
But like, the incentives can't come from the protocol, because if the incentives come from the protocol, there's just too many ways to cheat. Like you could run a full node without actually providing anything, and like what are you helping? But you'd still get the rewards. But the right way to do this is basically you have you create a market where clients that want data, so that want Merkle branches, receipts, state entries, whatever, on shards that they haven't already downloaded, can talk to server nodes, so nodes that already have that data, and basically get Merkle branches and verify them. And we have a market where basically clients connect to servers through payments channels. And the reason why payment channels are good is because all clients are going to make a series of many requests to the same server, and you get a lot of efficiencies out of that, and then this creates an incentive for servers to actually exist and be providing this data to like clients.
Awesome, that makes sense. I'm going to break up the technical intensity now with, aside from Ethereum, what's your favorite blockchain?
Ooh, it's a fun one. And I always like Zcash, and I think the community is very strong technically, and they've got these strong values around things like preserving privacy. I like, let's see, what are some, and there's like, in Cosmos I think is interesting.
What specifically?
And they just seem to have kind of done a good job of kind of building like tenorment and getting it to the point where lots of people are happy using it. I think that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's good. So I recently attended quite a few of the ETH Global hackathons, and there was definitely a surge of popularity around DAO-based submissions. And I feel like this is the trend of 2019 so far. There's always a DAO.
To be fair, the trend of 2019 is really putting like $100 million into DeFi contracts that may or may not have hidden backdoors. But
right. You can't read my questions way in advance, Vitalik. So, on the DAO side of things, how do you see that panning out in the Ethereum community and the Ethereum development? How relevant do we think, or do you feel this is going to be, particularly from the governance-specific standpoint? So I know everyone talks about Moloch and Maker and arrogant stuff. Like, tell me where your head's at.
Yeah, so I guess like spiritually, I really love DAOs because I think like creating new and better ways for people to coordinate and to cooperate on projects, whether it's a company, whether it's launching a new crypto project, whether it's a nonprofit and charity thing, running eventually parts of some kind of political system on top of it. Like, I think coming up with alternatives to basically existing like nonprofits and states and corporations is something that's definitely close to my heart, and it's I'm definitely like excited about the idea that with Ethereum we can create this platform that makes it easier to experiment with these kinds of things. At the same time, there's definitely kind of shortcomings of a lot of the existing constructions. So probably the biggest one that I kind of yell at people about the most is this collusion and bribing issue. Yep. So basically, you have a DAO, and if you have coins, you can vote. And there's like economic arguments why the whole concept of coin voting and shareholder voting is kind of stupid and plutocratic anyway. But even kind of going past that, basically the problem is that you can create a smart contract that just says, if you vote for this thing, then I will give you money.
Yeah, dark DAOs.
Yeah, dark DAOs. Phil Diane wrote some blog posts about this. Sellout DAO, this like actual implementation of a dark DAO for Moloch exists now. And if you do this, the problem is basically that good governance of like any public resource is a public good, and so any individual can only capture a small portion of the benefits from a good decision that they make, but they capture the full benefits from accepting a bribe that's targeted to them. And so if everyone does this, then the entire DAO could just veer off in a direction that none of the participants wanted it to.
Have you seen any recent examples of DAO implementations that you think are actually on track?
So there's two ways to solve this problem, right? One is to assume that it's not going to happen, and for most of the time, until it happens, and it could happen, and when it happens, you should be able to exit. And Moloch made a really good decision of adding this rage quit mechanism so that you can exit and take your money out. But exit alone is ultimately limiting, right? Like, we need voice and exit, and voice to organize collective exits, and exits from voice mechanisms. And so the other approach is to actually hunker down and build DAO designs that are more resistant to collusion. And I wrote this post on ETH Research about how you can use a combination of ZK snarks and some other cryptography to actually implement that kind of thing. And Barry's team has been doing some good work on actually building it, and I definitely really want that kind of technology to actually get tried and used as soon as it's ready.
So on that topic then, we're in Israel, home to some very dedicated and driven privacy efforts in the Ethereum community or the blockchain community as a whole. Where are we at in terms of privacy, right? So we're in the home of Starkware and a bunch of different other teams. Tell me how that's progressed so far.
So ZK snarks in general have really made a huge kind of leap of progress just over the last 3 weeks in a way that a lot of people aren't realizing. Right, so you have Plonk, this ZK snark protocol with a single universal updatable trusted setup, which basically means you have only one trusted setup that you run it once and it works for every program. You don't need to do a new trusted setup for every new program. And also the setup is updatable, which means if you have an existing setup, you can join it and you can make a new setup which is secure if either the original one was secure or you're secure. And what this means is that it's really easy for thousands of people to participate.
Okay.
And so Plonk basically is a ZK snark protocol that has only this very minimal trusted setup requirement. Also, there were some announcements recently about what's called polynomial commitment protocols that have really reduced security assumptions. And the other interesting thing that's happening inside of Plonk is that they've basically achieved this kind of layer separation where you break up a snark into two parts, where one of them is arithmetization, so basically converting a computer program satisfaction problem, so give me an input that gives this output, into a series of structured math equations. And then a polynomial commitment scheme basically is a scheme that lets you kind of encapsulate a huge number of values into a single value in such a way that you can still kind of make and prove mathematical claims about them. And these two things, you can kind of innovate on them separately, right? And you can kind of mix and match, right? You can take Plonk, cut out their trusted setup, add in another trusted setup, add in Fry, add in this new hidden order group-based thing, whatever. And so basically it's kind of like mix and match. You choose the trusted setup based on basically your political ideology. Are you afraid of discrete logs? Are you afraid of trusted setups? Are you afraid of hashes?
So in your opinion, are all of these different setups solving for the main problem, which is my ZK snark or Stark or whatever it might be takes too damn long to compute?
And too damn long is a problem that this is not solving. What it's solving is this kind of fragmentation in the space where you have these different schemes with very different trade-offs. And so here it's much simpler. You just choose are you happy with more cryptographic assumptions? In exchange for more cryptographic assumptions, you get shorter proofs. And second, arithmetization, which is just something that people can kind of quietly work and optimize over time.
Okay.
So it's not the sort of thing that you'll see the benefits of immediately, but in terms of what this will do to just developer tooling for the space over the next 2 years, it's huge.
Amazing. I want to touch upon the elephant in the room, which is DeFi. This has been a hot and trending topic.
I love elephants, and we're in a room, so this is great.
We planned that prop, by the way. No, we didn't. So on DeFi, this has been a hot topic that's been spoken about quite a lot in the last 6 months. There's been a few protocols which I'm happy to mention, like Compound, UIDX, and a bunch of others that have been spoken about. And I feel like there's a lot of reliance being placed on these protocols. Not good, not bad. What are your thoughts on how that all stacks up?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying that I'm very excited about the potential that DeFi offers in principle. So the idea that just anyone anywhere in the world can just have access to a system that lets them pay each other and lets them basically choose their own financial exposure is a really powerful thing. That's something a lot of people just don't have access to, and they're just stuck like holding some depreciating currency with no way to save in anything else. And kind of moving away from that is great. Also, another example of a kind of DeFi-ish thing that I really love is there's this idea that got published on ETH a few weeks ago called public interest projects. And what this is it's kind of like a spin on the DAICO idea that I had 1.5 years ago. So the idea basically is that instead of projects having ICOs where people just send them the money and then they go away, you have a scheme where people put their tokens into a smart contract, and let's say you would put your DAI into a smart contract. The developers don't just have access to the DAI and they can't take and run it. Instead, what happens is the DAI gets put into Compound or some other interesting thing. Maybe like you'll have DAI with its own native DAI savings rate thing soon, and that'll be great. And then the interest goes to the developers. So you're just kind of parking your money into a contract. You choose which project it goes to. This could be non-profit or for-profit.
Yeah, so this is like what Stake just released, right? Which is their robo-advisor yield thingy, Ray. And all it is essentially you deposit a particular asset. All it is you deposit a particular asset, and smart contracts essentially figure out which is the best.
No, it's not about maximizing returns for yourself. It's about basically taking the returns and automatically just directly pumping the returns into a project that you want to support.
Right.
And the reason I love this is because it basically means that, like, first of all, just because of kind of default pressure, people have the right to take their coins out at any time, but they're not going to unless they think that something really bad is happening.
Yeah.
Like, projects do have some stability of funding, but at the same time, if a project becomes sketchy, the CEO disappears and goes off to Indonesia or like whatever, then there's not like this existing pile of money that they can just run off with, right? Like they have incentives to continue building, continue doing good work, so they keep getting the money. And so this this could really mitigate a lot of the kind of concerns with fraud that we've been having in the ICO space. And like once again, like mechanism designed to improve human organization, allow these kind of more decentralized, trust minimized alternatives is something I really care about and love. But so now talking about problems.
Yeah, so I wanna pick upon just because I want to use an example, Compound. So you've got Coinbase that has chucked in $1 million recently. You've got Dharma, who have now going to be essentially using Compound's protocol to an extent. There's a lot of focus being placed on them. I know 1,000,001 code audits have been quoted and said there's a lot of pressure being put on this self-executing code, in my opinion. Now, people are comparing DeFi already to traditional financial ecosystems and applications and saying, or even comparing and saying that it's of a higher degree or equal performance. I have an issue with that.
Yeah, so, like the people like making those advertisements saying like, hey, look, you can shove your money into Federal Reserve bonds and get 1.5%, or you can shove your money into my fancy schmancy cybercoin thing and get 9.5%. My fancy schmancy cybercoin thing is obviously better. Like, there's definitely a lot that's irresponsible about that, because ultimately, like, there's a reason why these two things haven't equilibrated, right? Like, there's a reason why people haven't already just shoved all their money into them. And I mean, I made this kind of public Twitter conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, where I just said, like, hey guys, Federal Reserve bonds get you 1.5%, like Compound gets you 11.5%. What the hell? And like, why aren't markets equilibrating? And a big part of the reason just is that these systems are new, they are untested, they do have a non-zero chance of breaking, and we definitely at the present stage should not be encouraging people to kind of move their money into these things as safe investments. And basically, well, like, the problems, right? Like, one is that there's risks of contract bugs. Now, they and MakerDAO and Compound have been both audited. I think MakerDAO has been formally verified, and so I'm definitely kind of more calm about that before, or than I was before, which makes me happy. And I hope that we continue seeing more audits, more formal verification tools, more kind of secure standard components. But then there are other failure points. So one of those failure points is just explicit centralized backdoors. Another failure mode is the Oracle mechanism. All these DeFi things in the world are not, the decentralization is not going to do you much if the Oracle is controlled by one guy and the one guy can just set it to whatever value they want to just cause people to liquidate and then front run all of the liquidation yabs or whatever MakerDAO calls it, and steal a bunch of money that way, right? For a system that's holding hundreds of millions of dollars, you need to be making serious moves toward making a kind of multi-party Oracle scheme that is credibly decentralized and trustable. And these are good people, and I definitely know that they're making strong steps toward this.
Yeah, the intention's good.
Yeah, and there is good progress happening, but it is something that the community needs to kind of continue staying on the watch for and continuing to be kind of basically very vigilant about. The price of not having another DAO hack is eternal vigilance.
Understood. I reckon I've got about 15 more seconds on the clock.
55-0.
55-0. There you go. Thanks for the specificity there. So I want to put forward a question which was submitted, which I thought was really weird and wonderful, and I don't know, I just want to make things more interesting. So I know you played a lot of World of Warcraft as a kid, growing up, and I know that a story that you've mentioned quite a bit in the past is one of the core defining moments that got you to realize that centralization may not be the best thing inevitably for the rest of the world, was when the game updated and a few of your characters had some traits that were swapped, and henceforth the legend says that Vitalik never played World of Warcraft again. Well, Blizzard just announced that they're bringing back and relaunching World of Warcraft, or WoW Classic. So my question is, are you going to re-roll your characters and maybe make ETH a second priority for a bit?
I mean, if World of Warcraft moves onto Ethereum, I'll consider it. Do they want to?
You heard it here, folks. Anyone from Blizzard? No, okay, maybe not. Well, thank you, Vitalik, and thank you, everyone, for your time. Can we please have a round of applause?
So we've just finished up hearing from Vitalik Buterin here at the Web3 stage at the Ethereal Summit here in Tel Aviv. He had a lot of interesting things to say, mostly focused on the technical elements of the launch of the Ethereum 2.0 Phase 0 project, set to launch in early 2020. Dealing with a lot of the technical sides of things, talking about scalability issues, talking about layer 2 transaction elements. It was a very detailed technical argument. That being said, it seems that some of the more economic and larger sort of issues around Ethereum at the moment, its falling value against BTC and against the US dollar, the fact that it still has having a lot of issues and a lot of investors pulling out, and internal issues at the Ethereum Foundation not really being touched on in this event. There was no time for direct audience Q&A afterwards, so still many questions about what's happening. Though that being said, it seems the technical side of things, particularly with that Ethereum 2.0 project, are well underway, and Vitalik seemed confident that they will be able to bring some life into this industry. This is Ashley Westrop Evans at the Ethereal Summit in Tel Aviv.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.